welcome everybody to the FY21 Grants Information Session for MCAEL. My name is Rudy Jung. I'm the Program Manager for MCAEL, and online as well is Christine Neal.
Hello.
Thank you very much for your patience. We just had a few technical issues here, but we will go ahead and get started here. So today, we have a number of things to cover. This is our agenda. I'm going to first lay some context for the grants program by talking about strategic goals and initiatives that MCAEL currently has, an overview of the grants program and its objective, and then looking at the adult limited English proficient population in Montgomery County. Then we'll go into more specifics on the guidelines and application forms for FY21. As you see, including several things there: grant types, the focus of this year's grants, the application format, and data and budget workbook notes. That's just a few things that we wanted to bring people's attention to as they're filling out their application. Then we'll talk about the timeline, as well as the application review process and what reviewers will look for. And finally, how to access the grants portal and start an application. Before we get to that last stage, for those of you who already are familiar with our grants portal, you're welcome to log off at that time. So we'll be taking questions on an ongoing basis during this session. All of you are muted at the moment, but if you use your chat function, you can submit questions that way. And we'll stop for questions whenever they come through. Christine will be monitoring them. This session is going to be recorded also, and it will be uploaded to the MCAEL website so you can refer to it at a later time. And as we're going through this presentation, since many of you are returning applicants, I'll be pointing out the changes from last year. Okay, so getting started with the strategic goals for MCAEL. These have not changed for the last couple of years. We are still hoping to get to 21,000 by 2021. That's our overarching goal. And to do this, we have three program goals. The first is empowering providers to offer quality programs and instruction that lead to learning gains. Our grants program falls under this goal, but also under this goal are our professional development programs for instructors and program administrators. Secondly, we're seeking to increase the number of high-quality instructors, because as we try to increase the number of classes and the number of learners served, at the same time we have to have an increase in the number of instructors who can teach those classes. So we're looking at various things, connecting more with the Montgomery College TED program, and thinking about pipeline for instructors. And thirdly, we are seeking to expand our partnerships to enable access to a range of new workplace and community-based classes. And some of you are familiar with this. We have been working with particular employers for the last couple of years to provide classes for their employees. We are currently also thinking about how to increase access to English learning opportunities for groups like parents. And finally, just to mention that we are also launching some pilots on learning apps, using learning apps for people who may not have the chance to attend class at all, as a way to get them started. So moving on to an overview of the grants program. MCAEL has been providing grants for adult ESOL since 2007, when it was founded. And we've seen a steady growth in grant funding over the last several years. We are very fortunate to live in a county that sees adult English literacy as a priority. We're very fortunate in that way. For FY20, we provided $1.26 million in grants. These were 27 grants to 20 organizations. Just briefly, through the grants program, we seek to increase the availability of adult ESOL services, as well as the quality of these services. So we're trying to provide different types of learning opportunities for different types of learners. So for instance, there of course, structured programs that are managed enrollment that the learners are expected to attend from the first day to the last, and to move up to the next level after that. And that works for one kind of learner, but it may not work for the learner who just is limited in terms of the amount of time they have. And that learner might be more interested in attending a drop-in class of some sort, either conversation or otherwise. But we're trying to figure out a way to really meet the needs of different types of learners. And because of this, we support a diversity of provider organizations across the county. And they range from literacy organizations that really only focus on English literacy, to social service agencies that provide a number of different services to the community in addition to adult ESOL. We also work with community-based organizations that tend to be smaller and may work only with a specific community. And then, of course, we also work with faith-based organizations and their constituents. And as we provide grants, we're also trying to reduce the barriers to learning. We all know that adults have a lot of commitments in their lives. And so we are trying to reduce the barriers of lack of access to childcare or to transportation services. And so try to incorporate that into our grant making. So to step back a bit, to look at the numbers in Montgomery County, this is a chart of the adult limited English proficient residents in Montgomery County by age. This is based on the American Community Survey 5-year estimate ending in 2017. This is the latest that's available. The 2018 data was just made available in December, and they haven't quite caught up in terms of their tables that are available. But in any case, this number doesn't change greatly over a year. The estimate here total is 127,000 about. And so, as many of you know, this information is based on self-reported data. So it's a question on the American Community Survey that asks, do you speak English very well? Or I can't think of the exact question, but it asks people to rate their own proficiency. So this chart only shows the people who speak less than very well, which is the definition of limited English proficient. So you can see there's about 69,000 people who say they speak well. The blue shows people from age 18 to 64, and then the red are people who are 65 and older. And then to the right, the column is people speaking English not well, at 44,000 total, and then not at all, 14,000. It's useful to look at this just to remember that there is a great need out there, and while we as a coalition I think are doing a great job, still we're only meeting a small percentage of the learners, potential learners in the county. This next map is a map of the distribution of the limited English proficient population in the county. This is last year's, from last year's interactive maps that we have on our website. Just a word that it's being updated currently, and the new one will be available that will include FY19 data. It will be available in February. This map doesn't really change very much over time, or at least over a year or two. You can see that the highest density, and this is by census tract, the highest densities are the darkest pink. So you can see Wheaton Glenmont area, and then down in parts of Silver Spring, and up in the Gaithersburg area. So the darker the pink, the more dense it is in terms of limited English proficiency. This next map shows you an illustration of how well the limited English population is being served. To explain a bit, this map is basically the one we last saw, which is looking at density of the population, the limited English proficient population, and then overlaid with data from the MCAEL Coalition. So that includes all MCAEL providers, including grantees and Gilchrist Center, Montgomery College, and the Literacy Council. And so you get this combination. By overlaying it, you can see what percentage of learners in a particular zip code, how many, the learners as the share of the total number of limited English proficient residents in that zip code. So you can see there are certain areas, the darker purple means that there are more classes and they're serving more people than the lighter areas. I just want to point out there is an error on this map at the far left. You might wonder why it's dark way out in the left, Barnesville. That is a mistake. That should be white, actually. And you can see also here the class sites are the dots. And so the MCAEL funded dots are green, and the programs that are not MCAEL funded are blue. So you all will find this map useful, or the updated one particularly useful, as you're completing your application and seeing where the gaps are in service. So next I'm going to turn to some highlights from our guidelines and the application forms. First, to talk about the types of grants that MCAEL offers. We offer two types of grants. The first is program grants, and these grants are to maintain and expand established programs. And these are programs that offer 120 hours of instructional time a year per learner. They already have an established infrastructure so that they have staff, usually paid staff, and they have the standard ESOL measurements, the standard ESOL program components in place, including assessment measures. They're able to show a solid track record demonstrating that they can successfully carry out a program. And they have managed enrollment for their classes, meaning that they have registration dates with session start and end dates. In other words, they're not drop-in programs. So funds for program grants can be used for support services, such as, I should say, in addition to the core costs of running classes. These funds can also be used for support services, such as childcare and transportation. They can also be used to strengthen the program management and capacity of the organization to deliver services. And they can also be used for the organization's indirect costs. The second type of grant that MCAEL offers are called access grants. And they are named such because they're designed to create access for those who may not be quite ready to take a more formal or structured English class. So these are classes that are drop-in, and these grants may be for startup programs that just don't have the assessment or other standard components in place. They may not have the staff that can do this sort of thing. It can be for classes that are not situated in a larger ESOL program. And then for classes that have less than 120 hours per year per learner. So one new thing for FY21 is that requests for access grants can be up to $20,000. This is an increase from previous years in which it was $15,000. So there are a number of reasons why we decided that it was time to raise this limit, not least of which because it hasn't gone up for a few years and the cost of doing business has gone up. So we hope that that's helpful for applicants. So a word about the use of funds for access programs. It's especially to pay for core costs, including instructor pay, instructional materials and books, and program coordination time. It can also cover childcare and transportation support, as I mentioned previously. And also, we encourage Access Grant instructors to improve their skills. So you can use Access Grant funds to cover professional development time for teachers, the time that they spend in MCAEL workshops or other workshops. But just a word that when the review panel looks at Access Grants, they still will probably put priority on the core costs of the program. And then finally, in terms of use of funds, what can you not use funds for? For both program and Access Grants, refreshments or food, and gifts or gift cards for volunteers. And that hasn't changed from previous years. So in terms of the specific grants focus for FY21, some of this is not particularly new because we still have areas and populations that we're focusing on in terms of having fewer services. So one is expanded or new services in Up County. For example, the zip codes 20875 and 20876, and in East County, 20903, 20904. That's generally east of 29. Or in other zip codes that lack ESOL services. And again, that's where the mapping will be helpful to you. For Access Grants in particular, drop-in classes in those areas or in other areas. I think that we are really focusing on, because we want to increase the number of learners and making it easier for learners to attend class, having more drop-in classes available in the county would really be a good thing. And also services for populations not currently attending classes based on available data. And again, that's where the MCAEL interactive maps will be helpful, as well as some other sources I'll talk about in a minute. We still have a lack of classes on the weekend, on Saturday or Sunday, so applications that include that will probably be looked upon favorably. And finally, for program grants, innovative approaches to reaching learners. We're always trying to think of how best we can get to more learners, and so are interested in seeing people's ideas. So in terms of resources, as you're thinking about or exploring, what are the areas that need more services, MCAEL maps, there are a number of links in the grant guidelines, including, of course, the MCAEL maps, but also there are links to county sites, including the county stat website. There is a Community Explorer program on there where you can choose any area in the county, and it'll give you statistics about that area or city. And I also did want to mention the Healthcare Initiative Foundation, because they have it's called an Uneven Opportunities project. They have interactive maps on their website that are quite good, and you can look at, it's by census tract, but you can select what you want to look at on there, including indicators for English literacy, life expectancy, median household income, poverty level, education level, health insurance, et cetera, et cetera. But it's really interesting to explore that. I think it could be useful as you think about your application. Okay, I'm going to move on to application format. Christine, any questions?
I have a question from Leslie. She'd like something more about the search tool, to talk a little bit more about search tool. She's working to establish classes in 20875 area code.
So once our updated FY19 data presentation is online, you'll be able to go to the maps and click on a zip code, and it will give you information on that particular zip code in terms of the numbers of the LEP population, how it breaks down in terms of language group. as well as the class sites within that particular zip code, I believe. Right now, the FY18 version is up, so you can play with that one as well. I believe we're still working this out with county stat. They may take that one down soon, but we're hoping to have the FY19 one up there as soon as possible. So yeah, so it's really easy. It's really user friendly, I think, because it's clickable. You just click on the map. So I hope that answers your question. If you need help with that at any time, you can contact us. So moving on to the application format. The application itself has not really changed very much in terms of the questions that are asked and the data that we ask. However, online is going to look a little different. It's just broken into 2 online forms. The first form is the grant application form that asks all of the narrative questions. These questions are available on our website if you haven't already looked at our grants webpage down at the bottom, and I'll show you a screenshot of that a little bit later. It's available there, and it's a PDF version of the questions, so you can look at them before you actually go online and do your application there. So the grant application form has 3 attachments, and for returning applicants, they're the same as previous years. These are organizational supporting documents. One is a statement of financial activities for the previous year and the current year. The list of the board of directors, and also a financial statement. The second form that you'll see there is the application data summary. And these are selected data points that are taken from the data and budget workbook. Again, the data and budget workbook, like previous years, has several tabs on it that ask you for information about your outcomes, number of learners served, as well as how many classes you're going to have and where and when, budget, as well as revenue information. So the first thing you'll need to do is fill out the spreadsheet. And again, that is available on our website as well. So once you've filled that out, then you can take the specific data points that are asked for online and fill those in from your spreadsheet. And we urge you really to double check that your numbers correspond. Last year, there were a few examples of numbers that didn't correspond, which is a bit confusing for the reviewers and for staff. So please double check your input on your online form before submitting. Later on, I will show you what it looks like visually on the portal. So next, I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes on a few areas where we've seen there might be a bit of confusion. So we just wanted to give some guidance on, especially for the outcome summary. This is what the outcome summary looks like in the grant data and budget workbook. You'll see one column is for FY20 actuals, and the next column over is FY21 targets. So in past years, we asked for the FY20 actuals. We asked people to kind of project how many people do you think you'll have by the end of June, which was a bit confusing, and we got different figures, and then later people would want to have their updated figures. And so we think this year it's better if we just ask people to put their data as of March 31st. And that will be enough of an indication to the review panel that you're on target with your numbers and that you're progressing. Secondly, for enrollment targets, we would like to urge people to think carefully about how they set their enrollment targets. And in the past, perhaps we haven't been very clear on on what we expect on this. But we would appreciate if you set your targets based on historical data. I know some of you may have new programs and it won't be applicable for you, and that's fine. You'll just have to come up with your best guess. But many of the other applicants who know what their last year's and previous year's enrollments were should use those figures as a guide in terms of coming up with your FY21 targets. Instead of, for instance, just using the number of seats available. Because you may have a classroom that seats, 20, but historically you've been getting, 12 or something like that. The reason why we'd like you to be careful about this number is that we do use this figure, the projected targets, to assess progress of how many learners are enrolled actually at the end of the year. And we show those projected targets to our funders. So I think it's best to use a realistic number based on previous data. Sometimes there may be some confusion about duplicated figures and unique individuals for new applicants. Just a quick explanation that the number 1 line here, number of adult learners enrolled, that means the total number that will enroll in each session, your summer, fall, winter, spring sessions. And that is just a total number that it can include. If Mary attended your fall, winter, and spring sessions, she would be counted 3 times. So that is your duplicated number. Whereas your number of unique individuals enrolled is the number of what it says unique individuals. So in that number, Mary would only be counted once. In the past, we've had some applications that have left that blank, and we'd really encourage you to not do that. If you have a question about how to come to that number, please contact us. In fact, you can't leave it blank now because it's a required field in the online system. But if there is any confusion about it, please let us know, especially if you're a new applicant. So I think that's all I was going to say about this page. Oh, and finally, the number 3, number of classes to be offered by session. Just make sure that that is not the number of class meetings. So if you have, as it says here, if 1 10-week class is offered each in the fall and the spring, then you would note 1 on each of the lines, and then your total would be 2. I know we sometimes use the word classes in a very loosey-goosey way, but for this purpose, this is what the numbers you should use.
Okay. We have a comment from a previous slide.
Okay.
The request is to share the link for the Healthcare Initiative interactive tool.
Okay, well, the link is actually in the grant guidelines that are available online.
Okay.
It's both in the program grant and access grant guidelines.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the other thing that we wanted to spend a little bit of time on was the budget. And the budget, as you see, is number 3 tab on the budget, the data and budget workbook. And we really need you to be sure you have a clear cost basis for each line item in your budget. This is a sample budget here that I created with just some examples of line items and what we see as a clear calculation or clear cost basis. So anybody looking at your budget should be able to understand where this MCAEL request figure comes from. So in this case, we're talking about a program staff, program manager. So your cost basis should be based on, your cost basis should be for your program cost. So this budget asks for your total program cost. So the total cost for your adult ESOL program for the program manager is $32,000, which is 50% of $64,000, which is their total salary and fringe rolled up together. The MCAEL request in this case is 40% of that. Okay, so when the grant panel reviews this, they look at what you spent last year, if applicable, if you were a last year grantee, and then what is changed for this year. Another example here is for hourly contractors. Here you have instructors and childcare workers. And so here we have instructors that are going to be teaching for 32 weeks at 4 hours per week times 2 teachers at $25 an hour. And that's a calculation that got us to here. In this case, it's 100% of the of this line item that they're asking for MCAEL, from MCAEL. So this and this line item box are the same. But for childcare workers in this example, we have a childcare worker who's going to be working for 32 weeks, during the class times, 4 hours a week, at 2 childcare workers, $16 per an hour, but it's at 94% only. I suppose this is redundant, but anyway, this makes it even clearer that that's how you got to this figure. So I think that Christine and I will develop a sample budget. We might even put together a kind of a webinar or something on cost basis that we can put up on our website for people to refer to. There are other items that sometimes are questioned, especially like supplies. We need a bit more detail sometimes that's offered. So I can't underscore this enough, because sometimes if your numbers do not add up, or the grant panelists cannot see how this equals this, they'll just discount it because you don't have the time to figure it out. So the clearer you can be and the more detailed you can be in your cost basis, better. All right, any questions?
No questions at this time. Okay,
great. So moving on, we'll talk about the grant cycle timeline now. As of February 3rd, our grants portal will be open for new applications. And as I mentioned, or as I will mention, you can go in there and start your application and save your draft to come back to it anytime you want. You have control of when you submit it, of course. So, but it's being updated right as we speak, and we're looking forward to seeing the new and improved version. The week of March 9th, MCAEL staff will be available for questions. In other words, we'll be available for people to sign up for appointments for specific questions on the grant application. And this is specifically for first-time applicants, for new program staff, and for Access Grant applications. Tuesday, April 7th, 5:00 p.m., that's when applications are due through the MCAEL grants portal. And on Wednesday, May 13th and Friday, May 15th, there will be in-person applicant interviews with members of the MCAEL grant panel. These interviews typically last 20 minutes, and you'll find out more about that after your application is submitted. In early June, the grant review panel meets and they make final funding recommendations on allocations for the grants. This is after, of course, the county budget is finalized and we know how much there is available for grants. And then after the recommendations are made by the grant panel, they get sent to the MCAEL board, which reviews the recommendations and approves them. And then applicants will be notified. Then in June and July, there's the letter of agreement process for awardees, which is a process that lasts several weeks as we go back and forth on, and is usually or often some adjustments that awardees have to make to their budgets and their programs based on how much money they are granted. In September, the first grant payments are distributed. January 11th 2021. The mid-year report is due. Second grant payments are distributed in February, and on July 6th, 2021, the final report is due. So we thought it would be helpful for you to see this full grant cycle timeline in order to see how that fits in with your other grant commitments as you consider submitting a grant. So now I wanted to say a few words about the grant panel review. Every year we have a community grant review panel. And this panel, we seek to have it broadly representative of the county. So as much as possible, we want there to be individuals with expertise on adult ESOL or adult education. We want there to be both nonprofit and business professionals represented. People who have experience with grant making and grant review, individuals who have specific knowledge of specific populations and what their needs might be, as well as different geographic regions of the county, so that as a whole, they're able to see the grant applications in as broad a perspective as possible. And just an important note here that the role of MCAEL staff. So the MCAEL staff people who will mostly be involved in the application process will be Christine, myself, and Halima Ahmed, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. But we are here to support applicants, and we also coordinate with the grant review panel to facilitate the process. But we do not make funding decisions, and we don't participate in the funding allocation process because that would be a conflict of interest. So just to make that clear. Another thing we thought might be useful for applicants is to talk a little bit about what reviewers are going to be looking for. We work on a continuous improvement model. We're hoping that that programs, or we're expecting that our grant recipients are always thinking about how they can improve their programs. Now, not everybody can always increase their enrollment due to limitations on, your class location or limitations of staff or whatever, but there's always something that can be improved about a program. So reviewers are going to be looking for that evidence of continuous improvement. They're also going to be looking for a knowledge of the population that you're serving and a familiarity with the area that in which you're serving, and who else in that area are providing services. They'll also be looking in the applications to see if you're connecting the data about about the need for services about the need to the services being offered. To justify increased funding, they're going to be looking for a change in your program or increases in enrollment. And generally, looking for specifics, details in your description of how you're going to go about implementing your program or your class. They'll also take into account past performance and whether, for those returning applicants, and whether you're meeting your grantee requirements, specifically whether you're attending provider meetings and instructor workshops, whether you're responsive to MCAEL staff, that sort of thing. And of course, whether your application is complete, and especially on the budget detail, I would say. So that's kind of a general rundown of what reviewers will be looking for. In addition to, whether your program is addressing any of those priorities that we've set for FY21. So as I mentioned before, the grant guidelines and the questions, application questions, as well as the data and budget workbook are available on our grants webpage. Here is the URL and just a screenshot of what that page looks like this year, new and improved, thanks to Monica. Down at the bottom, you will see here. These are live links on the website, and that's where the all of those documents are available. And as of February 3rd, this ready to apply question will be a button. So when you press the button, it will take you right into the grants portal. Now for returning grant applicants, you should just use the login that you have currently. You can also use the URL link. It's the same link. That is not going to change. If you have a change in personnel and you have a new main grant contact, which will be the grant contact for your organizational profile, you'll need to contact Christine or myself or Halima, and we can change that within the system. You'll want to use the same organizational profile because then you will still be connected to your previous year's grant application and all your reports and everything. So please do let us know if you have a change there. If there are changes in your organizational profile that you need to make, I believe you'll be able to make that still at any time.
Ruby, we have a couple of questions.
Okay.
One is from Steve. Are last year's documents available to look at now? And I don't believe Steve is a returning applicant, so I'm thinking maybe last year's application.
I see. Last year's application is not available for viewing now. Steve, please let us know if we can answer that question. I'm not sure I answered your question, but please let us know if we can provide another answer.
And we have another question from Leslie. Is the grant only for nonprofits and faith-based? If you are in the process for a nonprofit, would that count?
Yes, you need to be a 501c3 or similar organization, or in partnership with one. I think that Leslie will have to contact us in terms of what her progress is in terms of her getting that status separately. Okay. Then with that actually concludes the information that I was going to cover. There's certainly more detail in the guidelines, and you're welcome to contact us with more questions. Just email us at programs@mccael.org. And you know what? I think that's a mistake. I think it's program@mccael.org, excuse me. Also, as I mentioned, there will be appointments for first-time applicants and new program staff. The sign-ups for those appointments will be available on our website starting February 3rd. So you can check back on our website. I just wanted to say that those of you who are already using the portal and are familiar with it, you're welcome to log off at this point if you'd like to. Or if you want a refresher, you can just stay with us and you can see what a little bit of what the newer portal will look like. It's not a great change. It's still very user-friendly. And finally, we'll send out a brief follow-up survey on this session, and we appreciate your feedback. I appreciate if you complete that survey. Okay, so moving on. I had hoped that we would be able to do a live, how do you say it, just on the website, give you a demonstration, but since it's being updated as we speak, I don't want to interfere with that process. But I do have a number of screenshots I can share here. So when you first log on to when you first click on the Ready to Apply button, it'll bring you to a page that looks like this. Welcome to the McCael Grants Portal. And it'll ask you to sign in. If you're a new applicant, all you need to do is use the Need an Account part down here and press Sign Up. And so when you click Sign Up, it will take you to a place where you can put in your email address. Sorry, I didn't include a screenshot of that, but It's a very straightforward process. You put your email address in, set up an account, and then it'll send you a link to the portal. So once you log into the portal, you'll see your homepage. And it will say create a profile to get started if you're a new applicant. For those of you who already have a login, you'll still see all of your other documents on here from this year. So in terms of creating a profile, this is necessary before you get to starting an application. So this is basically all the basic information about your organization. Name, email address, organization's legal name, address, etc. And one thing I wanted to note is at the end of this organizational profile, there's a question about, are you a 501c3? And if you are not, then it says, sorry, you can't apply. And if you are, it will ask you to submit your IRS letter, your letter of, what is it called, determination from the IRS. We did it this way so that for returning the applicants, you don't have to include that every year. It just stays there. Once you upload it once, it'll be there forever. I understand that sometimes when you're doing an application, you may not have that document right with you at the time. So a little tip about that is that if you want to go ahead and get into the application form itself, what you should do is just upload a dummy document there. Just be sure that you change it to the real IRS letter before you submit. So at the bottom of this profile form, there will be a save draft and a save button. So always do save draft until your everything is right. So you can put in a dummy form there, do save draft, come back later, and edit it. So for people who already have an organizational profile in there, you can make changes in there, I believe. I'm pretty sure. So I will make sure of that. So once you do your organizational profile form and you save and it's saved, you'll see on your home page that it says complete. And so if you click here, you can view it, and here to edit it. And then down below, you'll have a new section that will have a Get Started button. So to get started, you push that button or click that button. So this is the new format. When you open this, you'll see a grant application and you'll see an application data summary. For some reason, they open in different ways, but it's very user-friendly. So all you need to do is click open for this one. Actually, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Yes, here is the MCAEL grant application form. The important thing to remember about this is that after you fill in the legal name here, you'll want to be sure to fill this in right away with your programmer access, because that is what determines what questions show up in the form below. So other than that, I think this is all fairly straightforward. At the end of this form, there are uploads. As I mentioned before, the 3 uploads for organizational documents. Please note that even though we were asking for 2 things in number 1 here, the previous fiscal year and the current fiscal year, we appreciate if you could combine those 2 documents into one PDF before you upload. Next is, so when you click on the open for the application data summary, this is what you'll see. And again, each of these fields will ask you for current year actual, next year's proposed target. And again, these will be based on your data and budget workbook. So it will both have questions on your outcome summary and your budget. I believe those are all of the slides I have about portal. Are there any questions about the portal or accessing it?
There was one question requesting a list of requirements in advance, and I was just trying to clarify if it was for the application or for the grant portal. I haven't received the response yet.
All of the questions that are in the narrative are in the grant guidelines. It's attached behind the grant guidelines in that document, as well as all of the fields that are in this application data summary are also in hard copy in that link on our website.
Right, and that is available now.
Yes. So in fact, people have, just with those documents, they have all that they need in terms of knowing what the questions are and what is required for the application is available through those documents. They just don't have, you don't have access to the portal itself. But there's nothing stopping you from, starting now if you wanted to look at those questions. Okay. So that brings my presentation to an end. Thank you very much for attending our session here. I miss a little bit of seeing faces and hearing voices, but I think there's nothing that can beat this in terms of convenience. Again, we're looking forward to your feedback on the meeting and your filling out that survey. So thank you very much. With that, we'll bring it to an end.